India has the world's fastest growing aviation market, and its global ambitions are just getting off the ground. The country is racing to build 50 new airports in the next 5 years and more than 300 over the next 3 decades. But with significant challenges facing the sector, including high fuel costs, workforce shortages, and airline disruptions, should India's aviation industry brace for turbulence? Well, Mark D. Martin is the founder and CEO of Martin Consulting, an aviation risk advisory firm that works with airports, regulators, and airlines across the globe. He's also a member of the Royal Aeronautical Society in the UK and joins us from New Delhi. Great to have you on the program, Mark.
Hi, Divya. Thanks so much for having me.
I started this segment talking about the super speed construction of infrastructure and airports happening across India. But realistically speaking, is the airline sector keeping up with this?
I'm going to start with the airport segment because that's something which we have. We've actually seen it. Private airports evolve over the last 20 years. The bigger challenge we're dealing with at the moment is some of the existing brownfield airports not being modernized and expanded and augmented in terms of capacity. Now, that's a big problem. If you ever come over to Delhi or Mumbai, you're going to be faced with a whole lot of congestion. But some of the new airports being created are over in secondary cities and towns. For example, the Navi Mumbai airport, which is now slated for launch. Obviously, there is no local catchment there. There's no opportunity. You're just going to take about maybe 1 million passengers a year. But Delhi is 65 million passengers at the moment. After London Heathrow, Delhi is the busiest airport in the world. So the dynamics have shifted, but at the same time, building an airport is not about real estate play. It's not, having a residential property with a golf course that would kick the price of the property up. An airport is a runway, and that runway takes you to the world. Okay, so the offset and the subset of having an airport is pure core economic development for the region. But the region needs to have something to offer. What India at the moment deals with is what I'd best call growing pains. We had a traditional airport company, which is owned by the government, and we had private airport companies. And now it's starting to turn out that the government ran a better airport. So when you have a private company, he's going to think twice before he puts the money in. But when you have government taxpayer money, you have the luxury and liberty to do what you want in terms of expansion and modernization, right? So, so India is a glass half full, half empty at the moment. But I'd like to be a bit more optimistic in the sense that change is expected, change is on the cards, and we're going to see a different sector in the next 5 years. So, yes.
So, Mark, you bring up so many good points there and have set us up for a discussion very well. So let's take a bigger picture view of this. What is behind this enormous investment into airports and airports hub across the country? What is the ultimate goal? I mean, you mentioned government interest and private company interest, but overall, what is the final goal for this?
What's happening is that a lot of support businesses at airports, to start with air cargo, express freight, airlines like EVA Air that fly into India, SF Express from the Southeast Asian, from the Pacific region. A lot of them are not given priority while flying into passenger-driven airports, like a Delhi or a Mumbai. And that's one of the reasons that's really driving this whole objective of having a second airport near Delhi and a second airport near Mumbai. Now, granted, cargo is going to get a whole lot of fillip and boost, and it's a good thing, but you still need to drive those airports with passenger traffic. And, for somebody living in Mumbai to spend almost 2 hours to get over to an airport in Navi Mumbai, I mean, it's insane. It's an ordeal. It just takes away the whole joy of travel. So, we're dealing with a a catch-22, painted ourselves into a corner situation. To start with, airports need connectivity. You need a high-speed rail to get to that airport. You need to connect your existing airport. You need to have 10 lanes of highways and freeways to get you to that airport. So you build the airport, and that's a nice thing. But hey, you know what? You built the airport for a different purpose, and that was real estate and the opportunity. But now you need to create connectivity. So it's a horse before the cart before the horse sort of an issue. But I believe the current government is taking protracted and progressive steps to ensure connectivity at airports are not neglected. So it's positive, but it's going to take a bit more time for everything to really set in place. And we have to be mindful, Divya, that this is India. Okay, we might want to be the largest, fastest growing economy in the world, but hey, guess what? We're still pedantic. We're still laborious. We're still got red tape, and we're India. So that's the truth.
There's always two sides to a coin, isn't there? Just to clarify, at the moment there are no airlines flying passengers directly to India from Taiwan, and the EVA Air you mentioned was purely cargo at the moment, which we're hoping will change, and we will be discussing that a little later on the program. But speaking of, some of the issues surrounding these airports or airports that are being constructed and establishing themselves as hubs and viable hubs, one of the key issues that is emerging is India's airline sector, which again, we have no major national carrier, and currently we are being represented with 60% of the domestic flights by a low-cost carrier, which already is struggling with a lot of issues running into regulations or not being able to take in those regulations. Can you explain what's happening there in this sector, particularly with the turbulence we're seeing at the moment?
Divya, the problem with our current situation actually starts 8 years ago. When Jet Airways collapsed, it took 180 aircraft out of our fleet register, and then in 2020, Go Air, which was, if I might add, a fairly well-run, stable airline, pretty much ran itself aground because of Pratt & Whitney engine failures and challenges. And the engine's just broke in two pieces. The metal cracked. So, that brought down the whole of Go Air. In effect, post, by the cusp of 2020, we had nearly 260 aircraft off our market. Now, what happened here is that a certain amount of dependence came on a low-cost airline, which is Indigo, and then there was an Air India that was pretty much, still a monster in the basement. The government sold Air India to the Tatas. They sold it back to the Tatas, the guys who started that airline in the 40s. And post that, I think somewhere an Indigo was also affected by Pratt & Whitney engine groundings. In fact, in their own disclosures before the stock market regulator, they have said that their fleet was down by 60 to 85 aircraft. So when you drop your fleet, the remaining fleet that flies, instead of flying 12.5 hours a day, you're going to have to fly them more, to at least 15 hours, to make that network and schedule work. And that added a tremendous amount of pressure on crew. And crew is a major cost for an airline. It accounts for almost 25 to 30%. And with the new DGCA regulation that kicked in, that demanded airlines have better procedures and systems to manage fatigue. Pilots were being worked to the bone, flying nonstop, continuous flights. They were flying pretty much, flights that were right through the weekend. So the regulation that came in demanded airlines offer 2 days of rest in a week and no consecutive flights.
So Mark, India is going all out when it comes to airport building and making certain cities hubs, and basically in the infrastructure purely the airport infrastructure. But are the airlines, given that India doesn't have a national carrier, and it is a low-cost carrier that has the lion's share of the market, are its airlines keeping up with India's airport or, becoming a global hub ambitions?
Divya, India's air transport and air travel market grows at about 25% on an average. From a CAGR perspective, we're growing at 16% year on year. Now, with that kind of growth, India needs to induct at least 100 aircraft every year to match and sustain that demand. But however, as a result of instability, technical issues, Pratt & Whitney engines that have been breaking across the world, Jet Airways shut down, due to financial reasons, and a Go Air closed up operations. So that created a dependence on two airlines, Indigo, which is a private low-cost carrier run by a large travel company, and the second being Air India, which was sold over to the Tatas and Singapore Airlines, which owns 26% in Air India. Management control of Air India is with Singapore Airlines at the moment. But we have to be mindful that Air India is a monster in the basement. It's still being readied up for the market to take on the big growth opportunity, which they've marked for their immediate next 5 years. And that leaves everything on an airline called Indigo, which, as it is widely reported with most media outlets across the world, recently chose to refrain from complying with a safety regulation that demanded better work standards for pilots, avoiding overflying of pilots, to ensure pilots were not fatigued, and also give pilots adequate crew rest, obviously in the interest of safety, in the interest of those flying on board. Better landings. So if you're well rested, you fly better. You make much better landings, and it's more efficient.
Right. And so how does this bode for the airline industry if perhaps one of the most popular airlines is even bypasses very strict regulations that need to be in place for the safety of passengers? Then is the short answer that the airline industry is not keeping up with India's ambitions?
Precisely, and I'm going to add on that. After Air India 171, the Boeing crash, the tragic, horrid crash we all saw that occurred in Ahmedabad, India's reputation and credibility as a stringent safety airworthiness environment has come under a lot of scrutiny. The FAA, EASA, which is the European Aviation Safety Agency, and ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, pretty much downgraded and went at the DGCA, which is India's safety regulator, with hammer and tongs. And this obviously has led to a tremendous amount of pressure on India to raise its safety standards. Collectively, when you look at it, we've had a lot of incidents and a whole lot of crashes and catastrophic incidents, including that involved fatalities over the last 7 years. And this has created a tremendous amount of pressure for India, per se, to raise its standard. And by the DGCA, last week, going back on a safety regulation, just so that a low-cost carrier gets a little more time to comply, whilst, if I might mention, other airlines complied 8 months ago, sends a rippling effect that India's regulations are bendable, stretchable, and the regulator, for want of a better word, is spineless. And this has already had repercussions, with ICAO sending notices to the DGCA, which will be made public very soon, and so on. It's when you want to grow really fast and we really want to grow in the right way with the right support, you need to set a good foundation in place. It just can't be superficial, or the whole thing is going to come tumbling down.
Right, and that's where I jump in, and because meanwhile India's airport building and these amazing projects and wonderful architecture still marches on, despite basically saying we've got the hardware, but we are lacking in the software. So How much thought has been given to these airports? You mentioned connectivity to a certain extent, but how much thought is really given to these projects that are just rolling out across the country? Are there dangers of white elephants in the making, or is there the capacity already, and are people just waiting for these to come online?
An extremely relevant question to ask, and you're spot on, Divya. India also has a failure rate for airports. Airports that were created like Rajahmundry and Jaisalmer, where there was a long-term objective and a business case that said, we're going to get a whole lot of tourism and foreign charters and so on, charter flights. That never happened. Jaisalmer is a dead airport. It looks like a ghost town. And I think you really hit on something very pertinent here, and that is, building an airport is great. It's a great opportunity. It raises the whole region in terms of social standing and everything. Real estate rates go up, but eventually you need people who want to fly from there. You got to have industry. You got to have a strong residential catchment. You need to have cargo as an opportunity. It's not just about building an airport. It's about building an airport that's sustainable, because the money you put into an airport, which goes into billions, you're not going to recover that money overnight. It's going to take you 15 to 30 years to recover that money. So your long-term game plan has to be sound, robust. And also, I must caution what's happening in India. And, it's a heads up. An airport isn't supposed to be a political election stunt and a gimmick as a barter to, hey, I'm going to make an airport and, it's going to be great for everybody. And so come and vote me. That's never going to work, because, you're playing with taxpayer money. And not just that, for an airport to work, you need airlines to flock there. If airlines don't want to fly there because they don't see an opportunity with a target market, with cargo, with travelers, why on earth would you fly into middle of nowhere? And that really creates, again, back a dependency on a Delhi and Mumbai and a metro airport, because guess what? Those airports are established. All you need to do is expand them and modernize them, right? So it's great that we have these airports coming up, but from right now, if I were to look at airlines trying to go there in terms of opportunity, there are hardly any airlines that really want to fly in. They might start flying in about 5-6 years. So guess what? We got 6 years to build cargo infrastructure, but not much on the passenger side.
Right, and Jaisalmer, for our audience, Jaisalmer is a very beautiful part of Rajasthan, and I believe there were lots of ambitions to try and make it a tourist hotspot. But again, building an airport doesn't necessarily make that happen. So to talk about these airlines, India already has their major hubs. How much is being done in terms of bilateral flying rights, and how much has that got to do with the fact, with the popularity or the viability of an airport?
Yeah, I've always wanted to have more flights coming from Taiwan, because there's just so much of trade, technology exchange, software, computer parts, hardware that comes in from Taiwan. And EVA Air has been flying in India for the last, God knows, 25, 30 odd years with the MD-11. So that's always been an iconic
and that's all cargo, isn't it?
Yes, it's all cargo. It's all cargo operations, but we never really saw commercial passenger flights. But I think that's about to change. We're now obviously and unfortunately, a lot of India's bilaterals are connected to geopolitical issues. We had a very strong bilateral going with Turkey, but we're now backed off from that because of what happened recently. But I do believe that Southeast Asia and the Pacific will get more and more strong with India, especially with supply of semiconductor chips, with companies like NVIDIA increasingly raising their investments in India as a market under, for opportunities in AI. So all of that will create a whole lot of travel. So yeah, I'm kind of hoping to come over to Taiwan and try out those awesome noodles that you have there. It would be a great opportunity, at least for interconnectivity with the two countries. If not bilateral, at least trade should drive it, because bilateral is more like an obligation, a country to country obligation. But when you start having trade travel, that really drives on a more sustainable path.
There's a lot of potential, but there are a lot of issues also surrounding the growth of these airport hubs. And one of them is labor shortages, pilot and engineering training, and a whole host of other things that need to be tackled. But what do you think is the most urgent at the moment that needs to be tackled for these airport hubs that are coming online to work properly?
The cost of construction today with airports has gone up by almost 100% from the last airport development wave that took place. The cost of steel, cement, raw material, transportation, which is all connected to fuel costs, labor, quality of labor, that's had a tremendous amount of pressure with airport quality. Airports are being made, yes, great, nice looking airports, but an airport that lasted you 15 years now comes crumbling down at about 7 or 10. Our market is, as you know, our airports are very heavily dependent on people throughput. We charge something which is called a passenger service fee, and a user development fee. So every time I use an airport, I got to pay a tax. And imagine that tax, which is 800 rupees. That's $10. So that's $10 multiplied by about 3 million passengers a year is the kind of money an average airport makes. That's just by sitting at home and counting the cash and bunging it into the bank. That's not counting airport revenues. That's not counting terminal revenues, not counting landside revenues, or that McDonald's burger overpriced McDonald's burger that you buy, right? So a whole lot of elements really come in, but I think somewhere we need to have a building safety body for airports that really goes in and and pretty much raps somebody on the knuckles by telling them, look, you're not spent enough money on building a sustainable airport. You need to make a better airport. You need to improve your construction quality. So we have our own challenges. Yes, we've got a labor issue. We have an input labor issue, but the bigger worry I have is the airport company cutting corners with construction, and that's a major challenge.
And speaking of which, we're just about running out of time here, but India has yet to have an airport go into the global top 10 of the best. We see Singapore's Changi there all the time, and a few other airports that keep featuring. Firstly, why do you think an Indian airport hasn't managed to break through? And can you see one of these future hubs that are being built or that are due to come into play as maybe making India proud in the near future?
Well, honestly, I don't think it is going to make anyone proud for the immediate future, because, the reason I see that is Hong Kong, Shanghai, Taiwan, Malaysia, KL. A lot of these airports are mostly gateway airports. They're portals to a larger region. And it's all about connecting European airlines and the West with the region, with the gateway airport. And that's why you've got, airlines that fly within the region, that support the region, create interdependencies, a hub and a spoke network, if you will. But India could never really be a hub, because that hub status was already taken over by, Changi, Hong Kong, and KL. And we could have created a hub or a regional gateway, but we probably have to start. We should have done it back in the 80s. Today, the ultimate gateway terminal, gateway region hub airport we have is Dubai, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Okay, it's just these three airports, and so we obviously India's lost out, but our own air travel inertia is obviously so intense, and it has its own growth path. We're 1.58 billion people at the moment, so the traveling public within India is pretty high, and that's what makes our airports make money, and that's what makes them sustainable. But we're never going to be a Hong Kong. We're never going to be a Changi. We're never going to be a Shanghai. We're never going to be a Tokyo Narita. And that's a fact of life.
All right, give me something positive to end on then.
Well, I mean, on the positive side, I'm kind of hoping that we have a third airline. We've got a pretty good company that's entered into the airport business, which is Adani. They're working hard. They're modernizing airports. They're building new airports. And obviously, their vision is extremely long term. So, it's not all that bad. It's not all that negative. It is positive, but it would take time for results to really show up on your balance sheet and data to substantiate that the airport is making you money. So that's going to take a bit more time.